Hello everyone and welcome to the video. On my former wishlist items list on Rate Your Music, I had a pseudo-review of Audit In Progress by Hot Snakes. This video will be based on that. I'll go into more depth regarding points I made there, as well as bring up some new ones. You don't need to read that review to understand this one, so no need to worry if you haven't already. With that out of the way, let's get into it. So, with Audit In Progress, you're getting post-hardcore damaged garage punk essentially, with a more complex melodic compositional work of the former with the scrappy, aggressive sound of the latter. Reflection on this album is nice sounding, but still has a bit of that grit expected from this kind of music. The guitar tone here packs a bit of punch, but is a bit reserved when it comes to distortion, more overdrive than fuzz, I guess. It has this sort of twangy, almost jangly sound to it, too, which I think is evocative of that sort of garage sound. When I wrote my original pseudo-review, this was the only Hot Snakes album I'd listened to, but since then, I've listened to the album before this, Suicide Invoice. In comparison to that album, I think the songs here are faster paced, but also a bit more streamlined. Not by a lot, but to me, the songs here are just a bit simpler in terms of structure. I also feel that the sound is more consistent between songs, like the songs sound more similar to each other here than they do on Suicide Invoice. I think this consistency between how the songs sound was one of my main gripes with this album on a first listen, especially with the first 4 songs. They all just felt a bit too similar to me. I feel that it might have been because they all go at a similar tempo and have a similar kind of drum beat. Add that to the fact that these songs are all kind of in a similar vein, in this case being a fast, chaotic one, and you get songs that I felt were a bit samey. Now, that was during my first time with this album. After subsequent listens, differences between these 4 songs became a lot more apparent. And after these songs, I do think that the album does get a bit more varied. So it's not a particularly prevalent issue looking at it now, but it is something that did bug me about this album back then. However, it's not something that I can complain about that much, since this album's core sound is still pretty great. The songs here are as energetic and powerful as they need to be, and all members do good work contributing to this. On drums is Mario Rubalcaba, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This is his first appearance on a Hot Snakes album, taking over from Jason Clare. While I was ragging on his drumming earlier for contributing to the consistency in sound, he still does a great job here with drum work that's suitably fast and aggressive. And he does switch up the drumming later on as the album gets more varied. Garwood's bass playing, I feel, is kind of a silent workhorse. It's not super noticeable when listening, and there isn't any part where I was really wowed by the bass playing going on, but he's still an important part of this album's sound. Rick Roberg's on vocals, and he's great here. It's usually a powerful but somewhat restrained voice, but he's able to get more aggressive when needed. Packs a lot of bite and just sounds quite nice to my ears. I also think it's a good fit for the kind of sound they're going for. Finally, we have the guitar work by John Reese. He's the member whose contributions I have the most to talk about, and is for me the highlight of the album. I originally thought of his guitar playing as screwy, and I still agree with that sentiment. This album does have lots of weird and interesting guitar parts strewn about. Opener Brain Trust is probably a good example. Starts with this noisy intro that almost sounds like some sort of siren or whistle, before diving right into this pretty killer starting riff, then going into the verse riff that has this pretty sick, twangy feel to it. With just the first song, we already get a taste of the nutty riffage, packed together very densely in this case. You'll find riffs with that similar sort of vibe all across the album. But as I focused on how screwy the riffs can be, I kind of brushed over how pretty they can sound as well. Now, there are some songs like Plenty for All that I think try to sound more pleasant intentionally, or This Mystic Decade that's a bit more reserved relative to the other tracks. But there are also moments that are melodic and nice sounding, but still fast and energetic, with that edge from the nuttier riffs retained. Title Track and Hatchet Job are good examples for these riffs. They sound kind of beautiful, honestly, but still have that catharsis of other tracks with hints of their screwiness. Highlights a track that features both kinds of riffs together, with one part that's really screwy and another part that's a lot nicer sounding, if somewhat still chaotic. Even though this kind of guitar work isn't as out there as the screwy riffs, I don't think of these riffs as simple ones. These melodies don't really sound too basic, they go in some interesting directions, honestly. They end up still feeling unique in spite of them being more conventional sounding. Overall, there's a lot of variety in Reese's guitar playing for this album. I already talked about how he can vary between prettier sounding work and weirder, noisier stuff, but even inside those categories, there's a lot of variety. I mentioned that they have similar vibes, but there's still no riff that sounds too much like another. Overall, Reese's guitar work, combined with the efforts of the other band members, helps create just an awesome sounding album. There's 4 tracks that I want to highlight, starting with Think About Carbs. This track has guitars a bit more low-key, I suppose, and the verses there's only one guitar playing, and I found that a bit quieter than usual. The guitars being more in the background here helps put more focus on Froberg's vocals, which are harsher or more aggressive than normal. I think the best part is one right before the outro where Froberg just goes into overdrive with his vocals. One of my favorite moments from this whole album. Helps out the outro itself rips too, with a great closing riff. Next is Hatchet Job, which I already talked about before when discussing how this album can have its prettier moments. Outside of that, there isn't any major unique thing to point out. I just find it a really nice song. I particularly like how the chorus sounds. It kind of has this ambiguity to the way it sounds, like it ends without having this clear endpoint, but it still feels planned out and not just cut off abruptly. I also like the increasing nuttiness in the build-up during the outro. The only complaint I have is that the ending goes on for just a bit too long. If they just shortened it by a couple measures, then it would have been perfect, but as is, it's still a kick-ass song. Lovebird starts with this organ line that really caught my attention during my first listen. It's something that clearly and immediately tells you that this song's going to be different. This same organ line stays constant throughout the whole song. I think it's cool that it stays that way even as the rest of the song keeps changing as it goes along. My favorite part is near the end where it just transitions into this monstrous wall of noise that just sounds incredible. With all this going on, it's like that organ line from before staying steady even as this musical hurricane is ravaging the rest of the place. I also like how, even when that wall of noise ends, we still get some guitar work in. Almost like its retraction isn't quite complete, which I think is a nice detail. Overall, one of the most interesting tracks from this album. Lastly, we have Reflex, which sounds similar to the earlier tracks, but faster and meaner. Unlike the other standouts, there isn't really that much to talk about here. It's just the best execution of this kind of sound from earlier in the album. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Audit In Progress. If you're into garage punk or post-hardcore or other similar kinds of music, then I highly recommend this album. If you're like me, then it might take you a few listens to really gel with this album. But I recommend that you take the time and effort just because of how great it becomes once you get used to it. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. I know this is something I haven't really done before. This is something new. And if you're watching this, I just hope that this wasn't just like a complete disaster and you found some enjoyment. So yeah, have a great rest of your day and see ya.